What is up, everybody? Welcome back here to Devy Royale. We're having some fun today. So what I did is I got a bunch of Devy drafters together, and we're going to do a Devy mock draft. And one of the reasons why I like to do Devy mock drafts during the season, it does show you kind of how different everybody drafts based on player performance, right? And it can kind of give you a detail of like, hey, who's rising, who's falling. But also one thing I'm going to be doing is I'm going to be throwing in some Devy draft trades. So every time I do a Devy mock draft during this regular season, I am going to talk about some Devy trades that are actually happening out there in leagues just to show you some player value. So let's get into the first round here. Let's talk about it. So 101 is Ted McMillan. So as we're going through here, this mock, remember, these are 12 Devy managers out there, 12 team Superflex, tight end premium. Most are on our Patreon. We had some special guests out there. Brandon Lejeune from Devy. I was going to say Deep Dive, Devy Dynasty, all those different guys there. I think that is a lot of fun to do. Different Devy minds out there. So when you're looking here, Ted McMillan going 101. I mean, that comes off of his huge week one that he had there. Luther Burden, Jeremiah Smith, who I put on the thumbnail, absolute phenomenal. Another huge game this week, so he looked very good. And then it really is a tier break, right? Those three guys are pretty consensus out there. And then it's across the board. So if you look here, Zachariah Branch, Quinshawn Judkins, who looks explosive, had a big play call back this week. Ryan Williams, we're going to be diving into him and do a player spotlight for him. Ollie Gordon jumped up, had a really good first week, but that second week wasn't great. Then you had, Nico, and Nico's looked good. He just beat NC State, had a couple interceptions, but he was a riser. We haven't seen Nico rise in the first round until recently, and a big part of that is because you just saw him play, right? They're like, oh, he's pretty good. We're going to throw him in there, along with Jackson Arnold, another quarterback that, hey, you get conservative quarterbacks in this kind of format, but when you're thinking of Devy and you're thinking of, hey, do they perform? Did they perform weekly? You see how the value rises. So there is risk with Devy quarterbacks, but they do carry a lot of value. Now, the other guys, Evan Stewart, sitting at the 109, kind of had a breakout performance here against Boise State as the game is going, as I'm recording this. Ashton Genty as well has looked really good. He popped in the first round. And then Travis Hunter snuck in there at wide receiver. So that has been one of the bigger risers of this performance after that first week. Obviously struggled against Nebraska, but when you're looking at him as a whole, people think he could be a wide receiver. They have him at 112 now in terms of that Devy value. I've seen him get thrown around as 101, right? I've seen that value there. So if you bought him early in the offseason, you can capitalize on that. Now, the guy that I do want to pinpoint of this group is Ryan Williams, Alabama freshman wide receiver. Now, we liked Ryan Williams. We loved Ryan Williams. We talked about him as being that value in that second round. Man, he is absolutely dominating right now in terms of just touchdowns, right? 3 in those 2 games. He has 6 receptions, 8 targets, 207 yards, and he's looked dominant. And I think the most important thing is, like me and Jay Stein talk about on our Devy podcast, they're producing as freshmen, right? They're top freshmen coming in. He reclassified into this class to kind of get in there with Alabama, and he's showing that connection. Now, the great thing about him, I do think he's versatile. I love that he's explosive. He's an athlete, and I think he's only going to get better. I think there's a ceiling with him that hasn't been seen yet because he's still learning how to play wide receiver. I think that the nuances, route running, those things are going to come. But man, is he explosive. Man, are we excited to watch him play. And I think Ryan Williams is one of those risers when you're thinking of Devy, but when you're thinking of just mock drafts where he's going now. So if you bought him in the second or third round early in the season, I mean, you're excited about that and that talent there. Now, in the second round, that's where it gets fun. You got Carson Beck sitting at the QB position. The 25 QB class is absolutely just going to be a bloodbath, right? You have Travion Henderson, Carnell Tate, Nicholas Singleton, Colson Loveland, who is tied in 1. I'm going to keep saying that because I still see some rankings out there that I do not like. You might not like Michigan and you might not like that offense, but I'll tell you one guy who is a consistent kid. That's Colson Loveland. He is tied in 1 of this class right now. Ryan Wingo, Emeka Egbuka, Shador Sanders is in there, but he's all across the board. You have some people saying he should be the first pick. Then he goes really bad against Nebraska. Now he's dropping down. Like, his value is going to be a landmine. I would try to get out of Shador as fast as I can if he has a couple good games, because I just think that it's such a risk to roster him. Micah Hudson, we're going to talk about him. Martin Hampton looked very, very good. And Isaiah Bond is very consistent, right? Big win against Michigan, Texas had. But he's a very consistent kid in that offense. And I think that he's going to play his way into that day 2 capital, at least possible day 1. And then you have, Cam Coleman. Those guys, that's typically what you're seeing, in terms of value changes and all of that. The big one, Ryan Wingo looks like a dude, everybody. Like, when you're watching him play now, he hasn't got out there a ton, but 4 receptions, 5 targets, 70 yards. And again, freshman producing. We're like that. Today, he had that big attempt for 55 yards against Michigan when they played. He's explosive. And I love the fact that in big games, he's getting some run right now. I think Texas wants to use him in different ways. I think Sark can use his wide receivers in different ways. We've seen that consistently from him as a coach. And if Ryan Wingo's already earning the trust out there from his coaching staff, I mean, this class is looking like it could be one of the best wide receiver classes we've seen in a while, right? And I know that's hyperbole. We always talk about that. But, man, Ryan Williams, Wingo, Cam Coleman, we're going to talk about Micah Hudson here in a second. Obviously, he's trending down based on value. But these guys are very, very good. There's a lot of guys out there that are going to really kind of go up in this class, in the 27 class for the wide receivers. But Ryan Wingo getting some love out there, and definitely getting some value changes there. The other one that's drawn down in terms of Devy, right? And I'm not saying that he's a bad player whatsoever. So I want to make that clear. This is just that he's trending down based on ADP. And that's a freshman from Texas Tech. Now, some had him right there neck and neck with Jeremiah Smith. Some had him above Ryan Williams, right? And I think he's still talented. Now, at the time of this recording, when I did the stats, he just had 1 catch. He did not have anything in the first game, which is a shootout. And I know his head coach was asked about him. Why wasn't he out there? And he said, hey, we have a lot of veterans in this room. And to me, maybe he gets held back by the coaching staff. Maybe he doesn't. But he definitely has lost value so far for the first 2 weeks. And I think part of that is because how good these other freshman wide receivers have looked, right? So when you're looking at that too, you're like, hey, man, they got on the field. They're producing. Hudson has not yet up until this recording. Now, if he does, he'll pop back up, but he is definitely losing down in terms of that ADP. Now, in the 3rd round, Kevin Concepcion, who looked very, very good. I talked about him on the Devy Risers episode I did last week. Arch Manning. And Quinn Ewers sitting there at 302, 303. I have a feeling Quinn Ewers, this was before we did this Devy draft, right before the Michigan game. If we did this again, I bet you go in the mid-second, probably around the 204, 205 mark in that range. Definitely probably before Shador. Barian Brown, Tej Johnson, Eugene Wilson, Dylan Raiola, man. He's looked very, very solid the first couple weeks. He might be sneaking up there into that 2nd round value. So this is, again, why I keep saying value. If you're playing in the format, you need to know where these guys are getting value right now so you can move them, right? That's one of the reasons why we do the Dynasty rankings and combined Devy rankings on our Patreon. So you can use our trade calculator that we have that allows you to kind of make trades. That's the whole point of the Devy format, is to make trades and see what those values are. Now, Damian Martinez is there, Deion Brooks, Justice Haynes, Jordan James, Nate Frazier popped up. Nate Frazier is definitely a riser. He did not get drafted in the 5-round Devy draft that we did recently, right before the season. So now he's up to the 3rd round, and that's all it takes is one good game, and man, he rises up that value. So that's how volatile the value shifts can be. They're much more volatile in Devy than they are in Dynasty. Now, the guy that I want to kind of, point out, Quinn, he had a very, very solid game against Michigan. But, I think it's really him and Beck right now vying for that QB1, and with Jackson Dart as that sleeper based on play style and playing ability and what they've done out there. But Quinn looked very, very good today against Michigan. And there's not a lot you can just hang your hat on, right? Obviously, if you watch this on a different day, then, you're saying, why say day? But, when you're looking at it from that perspective, I watched it. I was a Michigan fan. He tore us up. I thought he looked very good against pressure at times. And it was funny because in our Discord, our Patreon, I was like, man, he's struggling a little bit against this pressure. Then next thing up, he evades pressure, steps up in the pocket, makes a great throw. I thought he was very nuanced on his reads. I thought he worked well through his progressions. I thought his deep ball was good enough. I thought that he was able to find open men on the outside. I think the one thing too is he can hit those corner routes. Like, he was doing everything. Quinn Ewers was fantastic today. And when you look at his numbers through 2 games, 506 yards, 6 touchdowns. I mean, that is QB1 status. He played like a QB1 right now, and Quinn might be living up to that expectations and that value. Now, we're going to go through these last 2 rounds. Drew Aller, he's moving up. We've got some life from Drew Aller. We're excited about that. Cedric Baxter Jr. obviously dropped because of the injury, and Texas not having him this year, so that's just something to note. Jonathan Cook, 403. Cameron Ward also moving up there. Matthew Golden. Shout out my boy Matthew Golden, right? Looked good today against Michigan again. He's still hanging around. He's still a very, very solid player. To me, he's a buy in the format because I don't think a lot of people are loving him right now. Antonio Williams, Jeremiah Love, Christian's guy, running back. He's looked very good for Notre Dame. Jackson Dart's moving up there. Jay Knott, Trevor Etienne, and TJ Moore still sitting in that 4-10, 4-12 range, 4th round value. Then you look in the 5th round, you have Taylor Tatum, Trey Harris, Then you have Deuce Robinson, Darius Taylor, Eric Singleton, Roderick Robinson, Torrey Horton, JoJo Trader. He got some production. We were excited about that. This quarter popped off a little bit today. We're like, hey, we got him out there. He's not just, healthy scratches. He had some production there from Miami. Garrett Nussmeier, obviously they lost last week against USC, but looked good as far as a quarterback class. I know there's some people that think he's QB1 still of the 25 class. Julian Sayin is there, Dylan Sampson, and then Luke Lachey. That kind of rounded out those top 5 rounds in their value. And you might see some names that, you're not used to. You might see some names on here like, hey, where are some of these guys? That's how volatile it can shift when you're looking at the Devy format. Now, look at trades that have happened. So here are real trades that happen in leagues or ones that we've discussed. This one did go down. Mekhi Lemon, Quentin Johnson, and Josh Downs for Devontae Adams and Dameon Pierce. So this is a win now deal. He talked about wanting to get Devontae Adams and having that backup in Dameon Pierce. And then you have Lemon and Johnson, who, to me, I like Mekhi Lemon. He's coming over from that kind of corner / wide receiver role in high school, but he hasn't really got a lot of run, right? And when you're looking at that wide receiver room, I don't know how much run he's going to get this year. Quentin Johnson is a mystery box filled with mystery boxes. We're not sure what we're going to get from him. I like Josh Downs. I think that was a good pick, but hey, getting A.D. Mitchell, having Michael Pittman there, what is Richardson's upside as a passer? For Devontae and Dameon, that's a great deal, I think. I think for both sides, there's a lot of risk on the Lemon side, and that's what it takes when it has Devy. You're like, hey, you're buying that potential. But for Devontae, it's hard because it's hard to value Devontae right now, especially with his quarterback situation, his team, his age. This is a pretty fair deal. I would lean the NFL piece like Devontae if I'm a contender, but I do think that pivoting off of this to Josh Downs and you're just hoping for the breakout is a fine strategy as well. Next one, Tua for DJ Lagway, a first and a second. Those are depleted picks. Now, this was a deal that was floated around in the Discord today, and I wanted to put it in here because I think it was important. They asked, hey, who would you keep? To me, I'm still keeping Tua. And I know that he had a bunch of different wide receivers quarterbacks that were pretty good in Superflex. And he was looking at, and he's rebuilding. Tua to me, though, he just got his contract. He's a very solid QB1, low-end QB1, high-end QB2, when you're looking at that value. If I'm pivoting from Tua, I'll take Lagway. I'm not a huge Lagway guy right now in terms of Devy value, but I want something else in return. Not a first or second and depleted Devy drafts, right? I do, and it was pretty heavy depleted. Give me a actually solid asset back. Give me that wide receiver 2 that could become a wide receiver 1. Go out there and get that target, that dynasty player that you can put on your roster, plus the picks, right? Or DJ Lagway, right? I do think you can get rid of the picks, get a dynasty asset with Lagway. I don't like giving up super flex quarterbacks that can be low-end QB1s, high-end QB2s for mystery box pieces. That's why I think Devy managers kind of accumulate all this Devy value, but it doesn't really pan out on the dynasty side. So I'd be wary of deals like this where I'm getting back a lot of risk, right? With Tua, he might not have a high ceiling, but he's got a pretty safe floor. So give me some of that floor in this deal. Let me find that guy and give me a safer floor. Then like a first or second, I still take Lagway, who has a high ceiling, right? And he has a couple big games this year. He could rise in value, but give me that floor, right? Give me that player that I really like from a wide receiver 2 site perspective. Now, the next deal here, and this was because of Isaiah Likely, his big game that he had. This was likely a first and Nick Singleton for Garrett Wilson and Jalen Wright. I like this deal. This was sent in to me. I love the idea of getting Garrett Wilson for this. This is exactly what you do to kind of get those premium assets. And this is how I wanted just to show you what you could do in a Devy league. Like, hey, you want Garrett Wilson? And Jalen Wright, of course I like Jalen Wright. I think both of those picks are players are very good. I like Likely, but I do think Andrews is going to be there. I don't think he just disappeared in this format. I do think he's going to be hit or miss. A depleted first and Nick Singleton. I will say Nick Singleton's going to be on my riser episode I put out this week because he is playing very, very well. But give me Garrett Wilson. Give me a top 5 dynasty wide receiver. I think that's a great trade on this side. And this is kind of how you trade your Devy assets, especially when they are doing well, like Nick Singleton, a running back, which has a lot of volatility at that position, a first, which is volatile in itself, and then Likely, who I think is hit or miss at that tight end position based on Andrews still being there. And I just don't know if the targets are always going to be there, right? Give me Garrett Wilson and Jalen Wright, and Wright could be a running back 1 if anything happens to Devon Chain. And then you look at Garrett Wilson, he could be a wide receiver 1. I mean, he has that kind of talent. So I just want to show you those trades to help you kind of value those players. So Appreciate you guys tuning in this mock draft. Again, thank you all the experts that drafted with us. Let me know what you think in the comments on the trades or the value, right? Who do you think were some high picks, some low picks, some guys that you would probably move off of if you can? So appreciate you guys. Check you guys next time.